talk us through the risks with China, because if they're going to ban exports, but what about zero mobility? What's the bigger risk?
So China is a very interesting story in the development. People are just sort of starting to catch up to it. What we have in China is a zero COVID policy. We know about that. Every little case, immediate lockdown, clampdown. At the beginning, that was hailed because it was enormously effective in terms of not letting the health system overwhelmed and limiting the number of fatalities. Now with Omicron, it becomes an increasingly dubious proposition because Omicron is so infectious that it seems very hard and require a lot of very, very, very stringent lockdowns to keep it under lock and key, so to speak, under control. Now, what happens here is a curious mixture. So I think, shall we call it distrust in their own vaccination that is probably not very effective. Then a huge 2-year propaganda roll now over that countries, how much countries are better, who limit the fatality rates and who are effective in fighting this disease versus others, like i.e. Western countries who are not having control and will let the people die. And then, of course, the everlasting quest for political stability. Now, that means that currently the economic activity in China is more affected by lockdowns than in other countries, where despite the big transmittability of Omicron, people are sort of loosening the ties because they don't want to wreck their economies anymore, because the actual impact in terms of fatalities, as I said, is less. Now, in China, the expectation is that China will follow that trend and that it will loosen up, and that therefore the economic recovery in China sort of remains at least at the trend growth we have seen last year, somewhere between 5 and 6%. And that may be wrong. I do believe that China will not loosen up the zero COVID policy before the Olympics, which are shortly before us. And I do believe that they are highly likely to leave this policy in place until the November Communist Party Congress, which is a 5-year event, which is very important and which is supposed to confirm Xi as the first, since Deng Xiaoping, the first leader, since Mao actually, who has more than 2 terms. So very important
Christof,
event.
if I can...
And if they continue that lockdown, then the consequences are quite dramatic for the economy and for oil demand. Sorry.
Christof, I just want to jump in real quick because you mentioned the political risk, and I want to throw another political risk at you. And this I am blatantly stealing from Manus because, you know, we share on this show. In terms of political risk, we also had Kazakhstan's government resigning over high fuel prices. How do you factor in these types of political risks?
This in China is less of, it is generally a risk which will have a backlash, especially against the energy transition, even in countries like European countries, which pride themselves to be environmentally sound. In China, it's much less of a risk because they can control prices. But I see, so to finish my story, you see how these two things can confluence. If it's true that China will sort of not loosen up on its no-COVID policy, what's the consequence? Will they just let the economy continue to go slower? Will they just face all these risks, financial risks that we have discovered now emerging in the real estate market, in the banking sector, in the municipality sector? No, they probably will do what the US has done already, which is giving themselves a massive fiscal and monetary stimulus. That's what I wanted to get at. So what I see on the horizon is that starting this summer, if things pan out as by now expected, and China harms its economy with its attempt to control something which is hard to control, like Omicron, that would lead into them giving up this very harsh line against no bailouts in the financial sector and continued retreat of the government, and replacing that with a good old stimulus on the monetary and in particular the fiscal side.